The movie begins with the appearance of Major Won Ryu-hwan, a high-ranking North Korean official who is trying to carry out a top-secret mission. However, there are no rituals attached to this mission, as if it were a special attack mission. Only one colonel sees him off. And with the arrival of his colonel, Ryu-fan's mission begins. 2 years later, Ryu-fan's appearance is very different from the previous scene. After all, his secret mission was to be sent to South Korea as a spy. Although he himself lives in a small village and has to pretend to be a fool, Ryu-fan himself is actually North Korea's most feared elite soldier. Ryu-fan was promoted to major at a young age, mastered 8 martial arts, and was a sniper with a 98% accuracy rate. In addition, Ryu-fan is an expert in medicine, chemistry and physics. In fact, he speaks his 5 different languages perfectly. However, if it's for the sake of his mission, he doesn't mind being stupid. Despite this, he has been spotted being bullied many times by small children. Here, Ryu-fan changes his name to Dong and lives in his grandmother's house, who runs a grocery store and stalls. Her grandmother already considers Ryu and her Dong-gu to be adopted. He also lives there with a man who is the son of this grandmother who only sleeps day and night. In order to hide his identity, Ryu-hwan intentionally takes advantage of his grandmother by helping run the shop, even though he earns only half of what he should be earning. To best his role as an idiot, Dong deliberately stuffs Poro up his nose every day and always accidentally falls down the stairs. He has to do it 3 times a day. In this region, Dong is considered a stupid man, so everyone is afraid of him. Just like one day, there is a beautiful woman, Yuran, who welcomes Dong-gu with kindness. However, her brother soon assumed that Dong had dared to see his beautiful sister and hit Dong on the head. To make the most of his role as a fool, Dong pretends to be a fool at all costs. While Dong looks after his adoptive mother's stable, he has to pretend to be asleep and show a silly demeanor. As a result, some children take advantage of this to steal sausages, which Dong actually calls an act. In addition, women who work in nightclubs take advantage of Dong's stupidity by pretending to buy cigarettes all the time. But Dong playfully always gives her a sip of cigarettes. Only one person in this neighborhood knows Dong's true identity. He is Jang Sok, a courier who has been spying for many years in South Korea. As Dong-gu talks to Jang Sok, he feels that the country no longer cares about him. That's because it's been a long time since he was last briefed and given a task. And as time goes on, he's just spending his days pretending to be a neighborhood jerk. Until one night Dong was seen doing something. It seems that he is doing his best while being nervous because it is part of the given mission. However, the mission turns out not to be dangerous as everyone but Dong has to defecate in a public place. For some reason, this time Dong didn't expect her actions to be directly seen by the beautiful woman Yulan who lives there. As a result, Yuran, who usually greets Dong-gu, now looks very dissatisfied. Dong feels like his youth has been ruined by his actions last night. Frustrated, Do-sok, the adoptive brother who always wants to look strong, pretends to teach Dong-gu self-defense. Because of this, Dong now wants to take his frustrations out on his adoptive brother. But he can't do that. There, Han-seok, a courier, delivers the package. When he opened the package, he found a photo of his mother in North Korea whom he hadn't seen in 11 years. For this reason Dong prostrates himself as a sign of his love and respect for his mother. One day, while on a mission to deliver groceries to his boarding house with his adoptive brother, Dong senses a newcomer who resembles himself. He is a spy and sure enough, one night while Dong was training to maintain his stamina and muscle, someone with golden hair and rockstar looks visited him. Suddenly Dong catches him a little off guard and the person immediately tries to attack Dong. However, Dong easily fends off his attacks. He is Lee Hae-ran, the general's son who is the same age as Dong-gu. This leads Dong-gu to ask, why is there someone as important as Lee Hae-ran in his neighborhood? It turns out that the purpose of Lee Hae-ran's visit to Dong-gu's neighborhood was to make sure Dong-gu continues his mission. Of course, Dong-gu doesn't believe everything Lee Hae-ran says. In the morning, Dong-gu tries to find out what Lee Hae-ran is doing in Korea. Equipped with very good stealth skills, Dong-gu tracks Lee Hae-ran easily. In the end, Lee Hae-ran ends up participating in a talent scout audition. Dong-gu gets jealous because he is only given very easy tasks, unlike Lee Hae-ran, who has to play the role of an idiot. One night, a neighbor's child suddenly knocked on the bedroom door. It turns out that this boy is asking Dong for help because his brother is missing. And now, local residents are searching for his brother with his mother. Despite pretending to be silly, Dong uses his excellent tracking skills to try to find traces of the missing child. Dong-gu jumps off the roof of one house to look for his missing child. Fearing that his identity will be revealed, Dong tries to dress himself up in clothes he finds on the street. In the end, Dong uses his instincts to find the boy staying at the barber shop. Apparently, the boy came to the hairdresser's owner because he wanted a cake from the owner who always gives him a cake. It turns out that the barbershop owner is in love with the boy's now widowed mother. However, Dong, who was observing the situation from the outside, is suspected of being a kidnapper because the cover-up is very suspicious. Luckily, he used that ability to escape without anyone knowing his identity. Meanwhile, South Korean intelligence is interrogating a North Korean man who has turned to pro-South Korea in his safe home. There they question the man about recent events. This is because North Korean spies staying in South Korea are being murdered one after another by a mysterious person. The man then explained that a special forces unit had been formed in his country 16 years ago and the capabilities of the special forces were beyond imagination. They were very easy to kill, and even the strength of one man was close to a force of 10. After that, the scene returns to Dong-gu, and suddenly Chang Seok, a delivery man, comes to visit. Dong is not supposed to get together today, so I think something is wrong. In the end, Chang Seok asks Dong-gu to take off his disguise for the first time in 16 years and hand over his gun. In the end, it turns out that the reason was the arrest of the entire family who were trying to escape to China. Upon hearing this, Dong-gu has no choice but to kill Chang Seok, who is trying to betray his motherland. But Dong-gu didn't do that and he told Chang Seok to go home and take responsibility for whatever he did. Meanwhile, inside the safe house, a former defector to South Korea is witnessed being shot dead by someone. So the superior officer ordered the South Korean Secretary of Special Affairs to find out what was going on as soon as possible. At night, Dong tries to write a letter to his mother, realizing that something has already happened. But suddenly someone pointed a gun at his head from behind. And Dong asks the man who would dare to do that to him because he's a special forces major who can easily kill people. The man only said that he came to keep Dong from betraying his country and quickly left. Dong tries to follow the person, but he loses sight of him. Dong-gu then visits Lee Hae-ran and asks if he has come to visit him. However, Lee Hae-ran seems to be relaxed as if nothing happened. Dong was on his way home when he noticed someone nearby who pointed a gun at him. With a little manipulation, Dong succeeds in outwitting the person. And the other person was Hyejin, a junior at the training camp who respected Dong-gu's achievements from the bottom of his heart. However, when Dong tries to interrogate him again, he loses sight of his junior. Somehow, this incident made Dong realize that something very serious had happened. This is because it is the first time in his 2 years as an undercover cop that 2 North Korean spies have come to his neighborhood. In the morning, Dong-gu finds out that Hyejin is disguised as a student and he must be friends with Yu-ran's younger brother who always bullies Hyejin. Once alone, Dong-gu approaches Hyejin and he asks why he came to the neighborhood. He then asks Hyejin to come instead of Chang Seok. Dong has no choice but to believe the status quo. The next day, 3 North Korean secret agents meet to discuss what's going on while enjoying some time away from the conflict. Suddenly, Dong's adoptive mother is heard arguing with 2 thug-like beard delivery men. They cannot accept that his mother has purchased goods from another supplier. Her mother seems intimidated by these two. Hyejin asks Dong-gu to fix the problem himself so that Dong-gu doesn't have to do anything. But Dong forbids this and he intends to take matters into his own hands. Dong then pretends to be stupid by falling down the stairs as usual. He then said he would report their conduct to the police. This made the thug emotional and pushed her adoptive mother to the point that she almost fell into a pile of glass. Fortunately, Dong managed to catch his adoptive mother. At that moment, Dong actually loses control of him and is about to pummel the thug. But his mother tells him not to do that. This surprises Dong-gu and asks, "Did my mother always know I was pretending to be an idiot?" He works and takes him somewhere else. Dong-gu asks Hye-jin to release his adoptive brother, who is being beaten by previous thugs because he cannot accept that his brother came to them alone and that his mother was treated like this. It turned out that there is Hye-jin and easily defeats the thugs there and frees Dong-gu's adoptive brother. Afterwards, Dong approaches his adoptive brother pretending to be stupid as usual. But there Dong found that in his heart there was love for Dong even though his adoptive brother was always rude to Dong. The next day, the neighbors of Higashi Ward held a party. Dong doubts himself, even if it's for a simple reason. This time he worries that the small happiness he feels with the locals will make him lose his desire to be who he used to be, and that he will want to live there forever. Trouble finally arises when a high-ranking South Korean officer decides to kill all South Korean spies. As North Korea seeks to improve relations with South Korea, its top officials have ordered all spies living in South Korea to commit suicide. And if anyone disobeys orders, the colonel will come there and execute the disobedience. Having a good time, Dong looks up at the sky and is surprised to hear a beeping pager like he's never heard before. However, Dong-gu, who read his message, did not immediately believe him as he had to commit suicide without further explanation. On the other hand, it turns out that all South Korean secret agents are immediately carrying out orders. Meanwhile, Dong-gu, who disobeyed orders, is quickly hunted down and tries to kill him by Hye-jin, who believes that Dong-gu betrayed his country by disobeying orders to commit suicide. As a result, a fight begins between the three. But Dong promises to find a way to survive the suicide attempt. The South Korean Secret Service chief, who is aware of this act, believes it is not right and is trying to stop it. So he and his men must find the Dongs quickly before they are executed. Shortly thereafter, the chief of intelligence meets Dong-gu and tells him about his plans to join South Korea. This decision ensures that Dong and two of his friends get the protection they need. Because soon their colonel will come to execute them. Suddenly, Hye-jin arrives, forces the intelligence chief to flee, and a chase begins between the two. However, it turns out that the chief deliberately accused Dong-gu of taking Hye-jin to headquarters to make him do what he wants. But Dong doesn't want to involve the locals he loves anyway. Dong then decides to break up and return to his true self. He then shaves his head and says goodbye to his adoptive mother. Afterwards, Dong-gu meets a completely different-looking Yuran, and Yuran and his aggressive older brother look bewildered by Dong-gu's transformation. In addition, Dong finds out that a woman who works at a nightclub is saving up to see her child abroad, so he hands over all of his savings along with the child's address. He then meets Lee Hae-ran and enlists his cooperation in freeing Hye-jin. In the meantime he will meet with the colonel. Dong meets the colonel and his men and asks if his family or mother is still alive. Because the only way for him to disobey his boss's orders is to commit suicide. However, the colonel orders his men to kill Dong instead, and a battle eventually breaks out there. Dong easily defeats the colonel's men. Confronting the colonel himself, Dong is somehow pushed back. This causes Dong to lose his focus and the colonel's men wound Dong from behind him. Dong is further cornered and collapses. Unfortunately, there is a kid who bullies him all the time. At first, Dong rushed to save a small child. In the end, Lee Hae-ran arrives by car and the two escape. As if they had no choice but to fight, Dong-gu and Lee Hae-ran order Chang-sok to bring his weapons and decide to fight. However, when they arrive at the appointed place, Chang-sok brings only a few bricks, and it turns out that Chang-sok is actually a lecturer from North Korea. The reason he disguises himself is so that the special forces organized by his homeland can commit treason. In this way, he can prove to the country that there is no point in forming special forces. Because of this, Dong-gu and Lee Hae-ran must first defeat Chang-sok and his men, whether they like it or not. However, Dong finds out that his family, especially his mother, was executed long ago and cannot fight. This causes Lee Hae-ran to fight hard to stop Chang-sok and his men. Meanwhile, the colonel will be here soon. Luckily, Hyejin came because he made a deal with the chief of intelligence that he would do anything as long as Dong-gu, whom he respected, was alive, even if it meant turning his back on the country. Haran then takes Dong-gu, who still has a thoughtful look on his face, to the roof of the building. So Haran persuades Dong to stand up and fight one last time. That way you can survive and find out what's going on. Hearing this, Dong-gu decides to keep Lee Haran and Hyejin safe. Then the colonel comes there with a group of men. Using his combat skills, Dong-gu successfully defeats many of the colonel's men, while Halon faces off against the colonel's familiars. Now the colonel is the only one left to fight Dong. The colonel knows that Dong is good at martial arts, but he was the one who taught Dong all these techniques, so he can't bring him to his knees. This puts Dong under pressure from the colonel. As the colonel was about to kill Dong, the chief of special affairs suddenly arrived with a force and ordered the colonel to surrender. However, the colonel was going to die by killing Dong from the beginning. When the colonel tries to shoot Dong-gu, Hyejin suddenly shoots the colonel first. Feeling pressured, the colonel puts a grenade in his pocket and tries to commit suicide together. However, Lee Haran arrives there and quickly pushes the colonel down until the grenade explodes, killing both the colonel and Lee Haran. Hyejin then tells Dong-gu not to let Lee Haran's sacrifice go to waste and flee, and tells him that he will arrest the intelligence unit. But Dong seems to have given up on what's going on. Besides, he has nowhere else to go. Then somehow he discovers a bank passbook in his coat pocket. It turns out to be a deposit from his adoptive mother. Her adoptive mother always put Dong's salary in the bank to save. And her mother considered Dong as her child, she wrote, and she urged Dong to return to life with her adoptive mother and neighbors. But instead, Hyejin fires his rifle at the Secret Service unit and hits the Secret Service chief. This inevitably leads to having to paralyze Hyejin. When Dong-gu sees this, he hugs Hyejin, but both Hyejin and Dong-gu fall down and eventually die. At the end of the movie, Dong's true wishes are revealed. That is to live happily with Hyejin and Lee Haran in the neighborhood where I live. The end. Conclusion. In the end, Operation Dual Identity weaves a gripping narrative of espionage, sacrifice, and the complex interplay between duty and personal connections. As the dust settles, the poignant echoes of Dong-gu's desires resonate, underscoring the profound impact of his choices on a world mired in secrets and allegiances. Thanks again from Movies Recapped. If you enjoyed this movie recap, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more captivating narratives and engaging content. Please also comment on your thoughts and so I know you subscribed and I will reply back to you.